Her voice trembled. "Tell me I'm enough." Human and aliens cry for connection asterisk. The unexpected assignment when dreams collide. With reality, Captain Jake Morrison had always dreamed of exploring the stars. But he never imagined he'd be chosen for humanity's most important diplomatic mission. The year was 2157, and first contact with an alien species had changed everything. The Zephyrians, as they called themselves, were a mysterious race that communicated through emotions rather than words. Their home planet, Nexus Prime, was a world of crystalline cities and floating gardens that defied human understanding. The call that changed everything. Jake was repairing navigation systems on the space station Aurora when his communicator buzzed with an urgent message. "Captain Morrison, report to Command Center immediately. Priority Alpha." His heart raced as he made his way through the station's gleaming corridors. Commander Hayes, a stern woman with silver hair, waited for him with a sealed folder. "Jake, you've been selected for the Zephyrian Cultural Exchange Program," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of history. "The Zephyrians have requested a human companion for one of their own, someone who could help bridge the gap between our species." Jake's mouth went dry. He'd heard rumors about the program, whispers in the mess hall about humans who'd been chosen to live alongside aliens, learning their ways and teaching them about humanity.first. Glimpse of another world. The journey to Nexus Prime took 3 weeks. Aboard the starship Harmony, Jake spent his time studying Zephyrian culture, learning about their unique physiology and emotional communication systems. Unlike humans, Zephyrians could literally feel each other's emotions through touch, creating bonds that went far deeper than simple friendship or love. When the ship finally arrived at Nexus Prime, Jake pressed his face against the viewport and gasped. The planet was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Purple oceans stretched beneath lavender skies, while cities made of living crystal grew from the ground like enormous flowers. Floating islands connected by bridges of light drifted through the atmosphere, carrying gardens that seemed to glow with their own inner fire. The moment of truth, the Zephyrian embassy was a marvel of organic architecture, its walls pulsing gently with bioluminescent patterns. Jake was escorted through corridors that seemed to breathe, the very air shimmering with an otherworldly beauty. His guide, a tall being with skin like polished jade and eyes that changed color with emotion, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "The one you will bond with has been waiting," the guide explained. "She is young by our standards, barely past her first century. Her name is Liana, and she has never interacted with a human before." Jake's palms sweated as they approached a door that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. "Remember, Captain Morrison, touch is sacred to us. Every contact creates a bridge between souls." When two worlds meet, the door dissolved at their approach, revealing a chamber filled with soft, ethereal light. In the center, on a platform that looked like it had been carved from a single enormous pearl, sat the most beautiful being Jake had ever seen. Liana was tall and graceful, with skin that shifted between silver and gold depending on the light. Her hair flowed like liquid mercury, and her eyes held the depth of ancient oceans. She looked up as Jake entered, and he felt something shift in the air around them. Her emotions, raw and powerful, seemed to reach out to him across the space. Between them, fear, curiosity, hope, and something else he couldn't quite identify, washed over him like waves. "You are the human," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made his heart skip. "I have been waiting for you, though I do not know why." Jake took a careful step forward, remembering the warnings about Zephyrian sensitivity to sudden movements. "My name is Jake," he said softly. "I'm here to learn about your people, and maybe help you understand mine." Liana's eyes widened, and the colors in them swirled like galaxies being born. "I have dreamed of your kind," she whispered. "In my dreams, humans burn like stars, bright and warm and dangerous. The beginning of something new, as Jake stood in that crystalline chamber, looking into the eyes of a being from another world. He realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have imagined. The mission briefings had prepared him for many things, but they hadn't prepared him for the way Liana's presence seemed to fill the empty spaces in his soul. This was more than first contact. This was the beginning of something that would change both their species forever. The gentle hum of the chamber's living walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats, as if the very building was celebrating this moment of connection between two beings from different worlds, each carrying the hopes and fears of their entire species. Learning to trust when words aren't enough, the first week on Nexus Prime tested every assumption Jake had about communication and connection. Liana lived in a dwelling that seemed to grow from the planet itself, its walls shifting color based on her emotional state. When she was calm, they glowed soft blue. When she was curious, they sparkled with silver light. And when she was afraid, which happened often around Jake, they pulsed with deep crimson warnings. The challenge of understanding each morning. Jake would find Liana in her meditation garden, a space filled with plants that responded to touch with musical notes. She would sit perfectly still, her hands resting on flowers that chimed like bells, creating melodies that seemed to come from her very soul. The first time he tried to join her, the plants went silent, and Liana's eyes filled with what he could only describe as panic. "Your emotions are too loud," she explained later, her voice trembling like leaves in wind. "When humans feel, it's like lightning in a storm. We Zephyrians are used to gentle rain." Jake felt frustrated and guilty. He'd come here to build bridges, but instead he seemed to be creating walls. Small, steps forward are. Kira Voss, the human psychologist assigned to the exchange program, visited Jake in his second week. She was a kind woman with gentle eyes who had spent years studying interspecies communication. "You're trying too hard," she told him as they walked through the embassy gardens. "Liana doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be genuine. But every time I get close, she pulls away," Jake said, watching a group of Zephyrian children play in the distance. Their laughter sounded like music, and their joy created visible auras of golden light around them. "How can I connect with someone who's afraid of my very emotions?" Kira smiled. "Start small. Don't try to share everything at once. Think of it like learning to whisper after a lifetime of shouting." The breakthrough that evening, Jake found Liana sitting by her dwelling's window, gazing out at the twin moons of Nexus Prime. Instead of trying to start a conversation, he simply sat nearby and watched the moons with her. They sat in comfortable silence for nearly an hour before Liana spoke. "On my world," she said softly, "we believe that silence is the first language of the soul. Before we learned to share emotions, we shared quiet moments like this." Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak without overwhelming her with his feelings. "Your people are different," she continued. "You fill silence with words, with action, with feeling. It's not wrong, just ... intense." She turned to look at him, and for the first time, her eyes held no fear. "But tonight, you shared silence with me. That is a gift." Building bridges over the following days, Jake and Liana developed their own rhythm of interaction. Mornings were for silence and observation. Afternoons were for careful conversation, with Jake learning to modulate his emotional responses. Evenings were for sharing simple experiences, like watching the sunset or listening to the crystal formations. Sing in the Wind, Liana began teaching Jake about Zephyrian culture, showing him how their cities were grown rather than built, how their art was created through shared emotional experiences, and how their society functioned through empathy rather than laws. In return, Jake shared stories of Earth, describing oceans and forests, cities and deserts, always careful to keep his emotions gentle and controlled. The first touch, 3 weeks into his stay, something unexpected happened. Jake was helping Liana tend to her garden when she stumbled, reaching out instinctively for support. Without thinking, he caught her hand to steady her. The moment their skin touched, both of them froze. Jake felt a rush of sensation, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was as if Liana's emotions flowed directly into his mind, her thoughts and feelings becoming as real as his own. He sensed her surprise, her fear, but also something warmer, deeper, wonder, curiosity, and beneath it all, a loneliness that matched his own. Liana gasped and pulled away, her skin flickering between silver and gold like a flame. "I felt you," she whispered, her voice filled with amazement. "Not just your emotions, but your memories, your dreams. How is this possible?" A new discovery, Dr. Voss was fascinated when Jake reported the experience. "This shouldn't be possible," she said, reviewing her notes. "Humans don't have the neurological structures for empathic bonding. Yet somehow, you and Liana created a connection. What does this mean?" Jake asked, still reeling from the intensity of the experience. "It means," Kira said with a smile, "that perhaps our species are more compatible than anyone imagined. You've just made the most important discovery in the history of interspecies relations." That night, as Jake lay in his quarters looking out at the alien stars, he couldn't stop thinking about the moment he'd touched Liana's hand. For just an instant, he hadn't been human and she hadn't been Zephyrian. They had simply been two souls, reaching across the vastness of space to find each other. Asterisk the deepening bond when hearts speak the same language. Discovery of their unique connection changed everything between Jake and Liana. Word of their empathic bond spread quickly through both the human embassy and the Zephyrian Council. Scientists from both species wanted to study them, but Jake and Liana found themselves more interested in exploring this new dimension of their relationship than in becoming research subjects. Sharing souls under the guidance of Elder Zara, an ancient Zephyrian who served as a cultural advisor, Jake and Liana began learning to control their newfound ability. The first lesson took place in a special chamber deep within the Zephyrian Council building, where the walls were lined with crystals that could absorb and redirect emotional energy. "The bond you share is unprecedented," Elder Zara explained, her voice carrying the wisdom of centuries. "Even among our own people, such deep connections are rare. You must learn to open and close this channel at will, or you risk losing yourselves in each other's experiences." Jake and Liana sat facing each other on cushions, made from a material that felt like solidified starlight. "Close your eyes," the elder instructed. "Jake, think of a simple, happy memory. Liana, prepare to receive it without judgment." Memory sharing Jake closed his eyes and thought of his childhood home on Earth, a small farmhouse surrounded by apple orchards. He remembered the smell of his mother's cooking, the sound of his father's laughter, the feeling of running through tall grass on summer evenings. As he focused on these memories, he felt Liana's presence in his mind, gentle and curious. Through their connection, she experienced his memories as if they were her own. She felt the warmth of Earth's sun on her skin, heard the songs of birds she'd never seen, and understood the deep love that had shaped Jake's early years. When the sharing ended, tears sparkled in her eyes like diamonds. "Your world is so alive," she whispered. "Every memory pulses with life, with growth, with change. My people live for centuries, but you humans pack so much experience into your shorter lives." Liana's world, when it was Liana's turn to share, Jake discovered the profound beauty of Zephyrian existence. Her memories were like living paintings, filled with colors that had no names in human language. He experienced the joy of her first successful crystal cultivation, the ceremony marking her transition to adulthood, and the lonely years she'd spent wondering if she would ever find someone who truly understood her. One memory stood out above all others. Jake saw through Liana's eyes as she stood on a mountain peak during a phenomenon called the convergence, when all of Nexus Prime's energy fields aligned. The planet itself seemed to sing, and every Zephyrian felt connected to every other living thing. But Liana, despite being surrounded by her people, felt profoundly alone. "That's when I first dreamed of your kind," she shared after the memory faded. "I sensed there were others out there, beings who felt as isolated as I did, who longed for connection across impossible distances." Growing closer as the days passed, Jake and Liana's bond deepened beyond mere empathy. They began to anticipate each other's thoughts, to finish each other's sentences, to move in perfect synchronization during their walks through the crystal gardens. The other humans at the embassy watched in amazement, while the Zephyrians whispered among themselves about the miracle unfolding before their eyes. Dr. Voss continued to monitor their progress, but even she was astounded by the speed of their development. "In 3 months, you've achieved what we thought might take decades," she told Jake during one of their sessions. "You're not just learning to communicate with an alien species. You're becoming something new, something unprecedented." The test there? Bond faced its first real test when a group of Zephyrian traditionalists challenged the exchange program. Led by Counselor Theron, they argued that the human presence was disrupting their way of life, and that the bond between Jake and Liana was an abomination against nature. "Humans are chaos beings," Theron declared during a public council session that Jake and Liana attended. "They bring disorder, conflict, and emotional instability. This so-called bond is nothing more than contamination of our pure emotional channels." Jake felt Liana's distress through their connection, her pain cutting through him like a blade. Without thinking, he stood up in the council chamber, his emotions flaring with protective anger. The outburst sent ripples through the assembled Zephyrians, many of whom recoiled from the intensity of his feelings. Standing together, but instead of being frightened by Jake's passionate defense, Liana rose beside him. She placed her hand on his arm, and through their bond, she shared her own strength with him, helping him find calm in the storm of his emotions. Then she addressed the council in a voice that carried both dignity and determination. "Counselor Theron speaks of contamination," she said, her words ringing clearly through the chamber. "But what I have found with Jake is not pollution. It is completion. For the first time in my life, I am not alone with my thoughts and feelings. We have discovered that understanding between species is not only possible, but beautiful." Jake felt his heart swell with pride and love as he watched Liana defend their bond. Through their connection, he shared his admiration and support, strengthening her resolve. Together, they faced the council as equals, two beings from different worlds who had found in each other something worth fighting for. The council session ended without a resolution, but Jake and Liana had proven something important. Their bond wasn't just a scientific curiosity. It was a living symbol of what was possible when two species chose understanding over fear, connection over isolation. That night, as they walked through the moonlit gardens of the embassy, Jake knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The universe had brought them across impossible distances to find each other, and nothing would ever be the same. Testing the connection when love faces its greatest challenge, the controversy surrounding Jake and Liana's bond reached a breaking point when the Zephyrian High Council called for an emergency session. Rumors spread through both communities that the exchange program might be terminated, and that Jake could be sent back to Earth. The thought of separation sent waves of panic through both of them, their emotional connection amplifying their shared distress. The council's decision elder Zara arrived at the embassy with news that made Jake's blood run cold. "The High Council has decided to conduct the ritual of severance," she announced, her usually serene face troubled. "They believe your bond has become too intense, too dangerous. They fear it could affect other Zephyrians, creating chaos in our emotional networks. Liana's dwelling walls flashed deep red as her emotions spiked. "They want to break our connection?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That would be like cutting away part of my soul." "The ritual is scheduled for tomorrow at dawn," Elder Zara continued. "Unless you can prove to the council that your bond brings benefit rather than harm to both species, they will proceed with the severance." A plan forms that night. Jake and Liana barely slept. They spent the hours before dawn walking through the crystal gardens, sharing memories and emotions through their bond, trying to memorize the feeling of being connected. As the first light of day began to paint the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Jake had an idea. "What if we could show them?" he said suddenly. "Not just tell them about our bond, but actually demonstrate what we can accomplish together?" Liana looked at him with hope flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Your people's greatest challenge is the void storms, right? Those energy disruptions that damage your crystal cities and cut off communication between settlements?" Jake's mind raced as the plan took shape. What if our combined abilities could help predict or even prevent them? The demonstration an hour before the scheduled severance ritual, Jake and Liana stood before the assembled High Council in the great crystal amphitheater. The morning sun streamed through the transparent dome overhead, casting rainbow patterns across the gathered Zephyrians. Jake's heart pounded as he faced the sea of alien faces, some curious, others openly hostile. "Honored counselors," Liana began, her voice steady despite the fear Jake could feel through their bond. "We ask for one chance to show you the true nature of our connection." Counselor Theron, a leader of the opposition, gestured dismissively. "We have seen enough of your emotional chaos. The decision has been made." "Please," Jake stepped forward, his hand finding Liana's. The moment they touched, he felt her courage flow into him, while his determination strengthened her resolve. "Give us one chance to prove that our bond can serve both our peoples." The storm arrives as if summoned by their words. The sky suddenly darkened. The crystal formations around the amphitheater began to hum with warning tones, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with approaching danger. A void storm was coming, one of the massive energy disturbances that had plagued Nexus Prime for centuries. Elder Zara's eyes widened with alarm. "All citizens to the storm shelters," she commanded. "The readings show this will be a major event." But Jake and Liana didn't move. Instead, they pressed their palms together and closed their eyes, opening their bond completely. Through their connection, Jake felt Liana's deep understanding of the planet's energy patterns, while she accessed his human intuition and pattern recognition abilities. Two minds, one purpose together, they reached out with their combined consciousness, sensing the approaching storm in ways neither could have managed alone. Jake's human perspective allowed him to see the chaos as a system with predictable elements, while Liana's Zephyrian sensitivity let her feel the storm's emotional resonance with the planet itself. "The storm has a heart," Liana gasped, her voice strained with effort. "A core of calm in the center of the chaos. And it's following the magnetic field lines," Jake added, his eyes still closed as he processed the information flowing through their bond. "If we can redirect the planetary field generators, we can guide the storm away from the populated areas, saving the day." Working in perfect harmony, Jake and Liana began transmitting their combined insights to the storm control centers across the planet. Their bond allowed them to process and share information faster than any individual could have managed. They guided the technicians through precise adjustments to the field generators, creating a corridor that drew the storm away from the crystal cities. The assembled council watched in amazement as the dark clouds overhead began to shift and change direction. The threatening rumble of the approaching storm faded as it was drawn toward the unpopulated regions of the planet. For the first time in recorded history, A major void storm had been successfully diverted. Recognition at last, when Jake and Liana finally opened their eyes. The amphitheater was silent, except for the gentle humming of the crystals. The storm had passed, and the cities were safe. Even Counselor Theron looked stunned by what he had witnessed. Elder Zara was the first to speak. In all our centuries of existence, we have never seen such a thing. The bond between you has created something new, something that serves not just your own connection, but the welfare of all. Perhaps, said another counselor slowly, we have been too quick to judge. If this bond can help protect our world, then it is not contamination but evolution. A new beginning. The vote to cancel the severance ritual was unanimous. More than that, the High Council officially recognized Jake and Liana's bond as a new form of interspecies cooperation. Plans were immediately set in motion to establish a permanent research station where other humans and Zephyrians could explore similar connections. As the council session ended and the crowds dispersed, Jake and Liana found themselves alone in the amphitheater. The morning sun was now high overhead, painting everything in warm golden light. We did it, Liana whispered, her hand still clasped in his. We proved that our bond is stronger than their fears. Jake smiled, feeling her joy flow through there. Connection like warm honey. This is just the beginning, he said. We've opened a door between our worlds that can never be closed. Looking up at the crystal dome above them, Jake could see the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home world. But standing here with Liana, feeling their souls intertwined across the vast differences between their species, he knew he had found something far more precious than home. He had found his other half, forever connected. When two worlds become one 6 months after the storm incident, the Interspecies Research Station had become a beacon of hope for both humans and Zephyrians. Jake and Liana served as the primary ambassadors, helping other pairs from both species explore the possibility of empathic bonding. Their success had inspired a new era of cooperation between the two civilizations. The growing community, the research station, built in the Crystal Gardens between the human embassy and the Zephyrian Council complex, was a marvel of combined architecture. Human engineering merged seamlessly with Zephyrian organic growth technology, creating a structure that was both functional and beautiful. The walls could shift color based on the emotional state of the inhabitants, while the rooms could reconfigure themselves based on need. Captain Lysa Chan, a communications specialist from Earth, had arrived 3 weeks ago and was already showing signs of a developing bond with Zephyrian artist Kale. It's like learning a new language, she explained to Jake during one of their regular consultation sessions. Not with words, but with feelings, Jake nodded, understanding completely. The key is patience. Don't try to force the connection. Let it grow naturally. Challenges and growth. Not every attempt at bonding was successful. Dr. Marcus Webb, a brilliant but emotionally guarded scientist, had struggled for weeks to establish even basic empathic contact with his assigned partner. The failure had left both him and the Zephyrian researcher, Vel, feeling discouraged and isolated. Liana had suggested a different approach. Perhaps the problem is not the inability to connect, but the fear of what that connection might reveal. She told Jake as they walked through the station's bioluminescent corridors. Some hearts are locked not because they cannot open, but because they have been hurt too deeply. Together, Jake and Liana worked with Marcus and Vel, sharing their own experiences and helping them understand that vulnerability was not weakness, but strength. The breakthrough came when Marcus finally allowed himself to share his painful memories of losing his family in a transport accident. Vel's empathic nature allowed him to feel Marcus's grief, and in return, to share his own experiences of loss and healing. A new discovery 3 months later, the research had yielded an unexpected discovery. The bonds between humans and Zephyrians were not just emotional connections. They were actually creating new neural pathways in both species. Dr. Kira Voss, who had been studying the phenomenon from the beginning, announced her findings to the combined council. The bonding process is causing evolutionary changes in both species, she explained, her voice filled with excitement. Humans are developing enhanced empathic abilities, while Zephyrians are gaining improved analytical and creative thinking skills. We're witnessing the birth of a new form of consciousness. Jake felt Liana's amazement through their bond as they listened to the presentation. The connection they had discovered was literally changing both their species, creating new possibilities for growth and understanding. The proposal. As the research station celebrated its first anniversary, Jake found himself thinking about the future. He and Liana had grown closer than he had ever imagined possible with another being. Their bond had deepened beyond mere empathy into something that felt like shared existence. They fought together, dreamed together, and faced every challenge as a unified entity. One evening, as they sat in their favorite spot overlooking the Crystal Gardens, Jake made a decision that would change everything. On Earth, there was a tradition of proposing marriage, but among the Zephyrians, the closest equivalent was the eternal bonding ceremony, a ritual that permanently joined two souls across lifetimes. Liana, he said softly, taking her luminescent hand in his, I want to ask you something, and I want you to feel the truth of it through our bond. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight above them. Through their connection, she could sense the depth of his emotions, the love and commitment that filled his heart. Will you bond with me eternally? He asked, not just as research, partners or ambassadors, but as souls choosing to walk through existence together. The ceremony, the eternal bonding ceremony, took place at the convergence of the twin moons, when the energy fields of Nexus Prime were at their strongest. Representatives from both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld attended, making it the first interspecies bonding in recorded history. Elder Zara officiated the ceremony, her ancient voice carrying the weight of tradition and the promise of new beginnings. Today, we witness not just the joining of two souls, but the birth of a new form of existence. Jake Morrison of Earth and Liana of Nexus Prime, you have shown us that love transcends the boundaries of species, of worlds, of everything we thought we knew about the nature of connection. As the ceremony reached its climax, Jake and Liana placed their hands on the ancient bonding crystal, a massive formation that had recorded the emotional signatures of Zephyrian couples for millennia. The moment they touched it together, their bond flared with brilliant light, their combined life forces creating patterns of energy that spiraled up into the night sky. The future standing there, in the light of their joined souls, Jake and Liana could see the future spreading out before them like a vast ocean of possibility. The research station would grow into a city, then a world where humans and Zephyrians lived and worked together. Their children, the first of a new hybrid species, would inherit the best qualities of both races. Through their bond, they shared visions of exploration ships crewed by bonded pairs, spreading out across the galaxy to make contact with other species. They saw art and music and literature that combined human creativity with Zephyrian emotional depth. They saw a future where the barriers between species were not obstacles to be overcome, but differences to be celebrated. Epilogue. A love that changed everything years later, when historians looked back at the moment when everything changed between humans and Zephyrians. They would point to that first contact in the crystalline chamber. But Jake and Liana knew the truth was simpler and more profound than any historical analysis could capture. Two lonely souls had reached across the vastness of space and found each other. In doing so, they had discovered that love was not just an emotion but a force of nature, capable of transforming not just individuals but entire civilizations. As they stood together in their garden, watching their children play among flowers that sang with joy, Jake and Liana knew that their love story was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, other species were waiting to discover that the universe was not a cold, empty place, but a web of connections waiting to be made. Their bond had proven that no distance was too great, no difference too vast, when hearts chose to reach for each other across the darkness. And in that reaching, in that choosing to love despite every obstacle, they had changed the very nature of what it meant to be alive in the cosmos.